All right, Mr. Mathiesen, so how long have you lived in Saratoga Springs?
I've lived in Saratoga Springs since I was 3.5 years old, so I've lived here since 1954, which is a very long time ago.
All right, what's your favorite thing about living in Saratoga?
I've seen very different Saratoga Springs through my years. The city that we have now is very different from what we had back then. In the 50s and 60s when I was growing up here, for instance, the Skidmore campus was centered on Union Avenue and Circular Street, and in the off season, when it wasn't racing, the 4 weeks of racing season, pretty much most of the economic activity and I think a lot of the bustle and hustle in the city centered around the Skidmore campus. So when the Skidmore campus moved out of the city, that left kind of a void in the late 60s, early 70s through the 70s and early 80s, and that was filled with investment in a lot of the buildings that were there had been used for Skidmore in the past, and that reinvigorated the city. The Northway came through in the 60s. That changed things a lot and turned this into a bedroom community. So it's very different now than it was back then. Back then it was a sleepy little city. It was a great place to grow up. Now it's a 12-month-a-year, really economically active city, unusual for the Northeast these days. We have a very active downtown. We have, I think, a successful business community. We keep having businesses coming into the city. We have more people coming into the city to work as opposed to the past where people would leave the city every day and come back at night. So those are good goals that we had in the past, and I think they've been well fulfilled. For me, it was a great place for me to grow up. It was a great place to raise my kids. I have a grandson here now, 10 months old. Wow. He'll have the chance to grow up here. One of my kids finally moved back to Saratoga, which is nice. One of our 5 kids, so that's nice. So we have really 3 generations of people who are growing up here, have grown up here. My father, my 92-year-old father, still lives here, and so I have a lot of responsibilities here. But my main reason for continuing to be here is I've been practicing my profession here for all these years. I really love the community. I love Saratoga Springs. I love my friends, my patients. I enjoy being here.
Right. What has your greatest accomplishment been as Public Safety Commissioner?
My greatest accomplishment as Public Safety Commissioner has probably been the progress that we've finally made in establishing a plan for acquiring land for a third fire and EMS station. That's really important. That's something they've been talking about for years. They've known that the coverage for fire and definitely more recently for emergency medical services has been out of balance in the city. And when they put the fire station on the west side of the city, over on the West Avenue, they anticipated then that they would soon after have to place an additional station on the east side. Well, for years and years they didn't, and in the meantime, the Eastern Plateau became highly developed for residential use, and so now we have a situation where the fire and EMS calls to the Eastern Plateau take an awfully long time. And when those resources are out there taking care of emergencies, those are resources that are far away from the core of the city where most of the calls come. So it's really important to look at ways of redistributing our fire and EMS resources so they're spread across the city and they're spread more evenly. And so the land acquisitions that we have made some progress on, and they haven't been finalized yet, but made some progress on, are the first solid steps towards acquiring a parcel in the recommended location in the city for the third station that will eventually house a fire and EMS station. That would be my top priority, and that's not much lower in terms of accomplishments would be the police station renovation. The police were working out of a facility that had never been upgraded, was basically a hodgepodge in terms of the way it was laid out. It was crowded. There were wires hanging out of ceilings that nobody knew where they went to, and most disturbingly, there was a security concern because the jail is housed there too. Well, there was really no barrier between the area where the jail area is and the area where people were being processed as they were being arrested from the rest of the station. So there was a security problem there. So we had originally wanted to build a new police station. There really isn't money in the budget for that, and so It just didn't make any sense just to continue to kick the can down the road. Something had to be done. So we did make an investment in the existing police station, and as a result, the station is much safer. It's much more logical in terms of its layout. It's much safer, and a much better working environment for the police personnel who have to work there. We took some extra space that we had in the public safety offices and moved the police chiefs and the lieutenants up to the second floor of City Hall where the public safety offices are, and that brought a lot of extra space downstairs that they were able to use to redistribute the layout. And it was about a year process, and it was not easy. We had to use temporary office space for a while, but it worked out well. And I really think that that's something that was very important too. Someday we do need to build an up-to-date police station, very definitely, but there just isn't the money in the budget for now. Saratoga Springs runs on a very tight budget, and it's a successful city, but we don't have the extra money to do that right now. So in about 10 or 15 years, I think the city should be looking at a new police station, but I think we bought the city some time.
Well, that's awesome. So what are your day-to-day responsibilities as public safety commissioner?
Okay, a lot of people don't understand the commission form of government. The commission form of government is very unique. There are very few cities that continue to have the commission form of government. It was very popular in about 1910, 1915. It was a reform type of movement. The city of Saratoga Springs was incorporated as a city in 1915, and that's when our commission form of government began. So this is our centennial year. The commission form of government consists of basically 5 people on the city council: a mayor, a commissioner of finance, commissioner of accounts, commissioner of public works, and the commissioner of public safety. Basically, the commissioners have oversight of their departments, and they also obviously wear a different hat. They are legislators too, because all the business that comes before the city has to be approved by the city council. So my responsibilities are twofold. My responsibilities are for oversight of our police and fire and code enforcement and parking enforcement and traffic regulations departments in my department. And it is oversight. I do have a full-time deputy who is there all day on a full-time basis. I have a career. I'm a general dentist, and as has been the case for many years, the commissioners have other careers. We're paid $14,500 a year. We're not paid to be full-time commissioners. That's not the way it works. So our deputies make $70,000 and plus benefits. So obviously they are the full-time. They operate in the capacity as our representative on a full-time basis in City Hall. I do get to City Hall every day. I practice dentistry on West Avenue, and so I leave my office at around noon, and I drive to City Hall, and I eat my lunch, and I do all kinds of city business, and then I go back to my office on West Avenue about 3 to continue seeing my patients. And on Wednesday afternoons, I have had a free Wednesday afternoon in my dental practice for years. So instead of doing pleasurable things, I go to City Hall on Wednesday afternoons and spend most of my afternoon there.
All right.
So, and in terms of responsibilities, the police department, I think, really needs to be run by the police chief. The fire department really needs to be run by the fire chief. These are people who are experts in their field. These are people who are experts in these professions. These professions have become much more complicated and much more involved, both police and fire. And so I rely on my chiefs to operate those departments on a day-to-day basis. I'm very proud of both of our chiefs and the assistant chiefs. They do a great job in running those departments. The police chief has reorganized the entire police department in terms of operations. I think it's a much more logical setup than it had been in the past. I think it's a much more prudent way of running that department. And the same with our fire chief. Our fire chief and assistant chief oversee a department that has taken on new responsibility. They hadn't been required to provide ambulance transport service until the local volunteer department went out of business. So they took over ambulance transport, something that they were well able to do because all our firefighters are EMTs and paramedics. They're all trained to provide these services. And the engine crews for each department have been responding to medical emergencies for years, whether or not there is an ambulance transport involved or not. So they were well able to take over the ambulance transport. And it's pretty seamless because of the fact that we have so much redundancy, since each and every of the firefighters are perfectly capable of operating the ambulance or the fire apparatus. They basically are taking their fire apparatus to medical emergencies in case they get called to a fire while they're coming back from the medical emergency. So it's worked very well. I think the people of Saratoga Springs don't realize how far superior the service they have is compared to other municipalities where they have volunteer fire departments, which are great, but it's a different kind of situation. And their volunteer fire departments only take care of fires. They don't take care of medical emergencies. We have a much more comprehensive approach to emergency services in the city.
So what inspired you to run as Public Safety Commissioner originally?
I've lived in Saratoga Springs for all these years. I have great concern for my city. I was a member of the City Democratic Committee from 1992 until 2008. I've always been interested in the operation of city government. I've often felt that Saratoga Springs, which had for a very, very long time, basically dominated by one party, the Republican Party, really felt that the city needed to have two parties, not one, and needed to have balance. And so I worked very hard to try to bring about that balance. And so I was involved in politics in the city for a long time. I served on the Zoning Board of Appeals from 2000 through 2006. I was chair in 2005 and 2006. I know zoning and a lot of issues regarding city government, open meetings laws, things of that sort, because of my experience there and all the training that was involved in being on the ZBA. That's the kind of information and then the kind of background that's very helpful in my capacity on the city council. For instance, this past year we passed, for the first time since 2001, we passed a revision of the city's comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan basically is a roadmap in terms of how the city is developed, and it provides an oversight and the values by which we determine what zoning is allowed, what can be put where, and so it was very important, I think, to have people who had some background in zoning and planning as the city council was making the final determinations of what that comprehensive plan would say. And I'm very proud of what the comprehensive plan says, because the comprehensive plan is calling for continuation of the values we have had in the past, which is basically the city and the country. And the city and the country makes possible what you see downtown. Downtown is successful today because we have strict zoning that keeps our concentration of commercial uses and also dense residential uses in the core of the city, and it prevents sprawl in the outskirts of the city. And so Saratoga Springs looks different than Clifton Park or Queensbury or Colony or Albany. It looks different partially to a large extent because of our strict zoning. When I was on the Zoning Board of Appeals, then we would have statewide meetings with other zoning and planning boards from across the state. Saratoga Springs was held out as an example of what zoning should be. And so we should be very proud of what the people who were in the planning department were talking about and what previous councils approved in 1999 and 2001. And I'm very happy that we were able to fulfill that as we revised the comprehensive plan in 2015. Now the key is to make sure that we follow through with those standards. There are people in the community who want to undermine the city and the country. There are people in the community who want to bring about commercial uses in the parts of the city where we don't allow heavy commercial uses. And it's very important that we don't allow that influence to dictate where the city is going to go down the road. Because I do think that when you start doing that, when you start allowing that commercial sprawl, you start to undermine what we have. You start to undermine the commercial core. And I think that you adversely affect the Greenbelt.
So now that you're talking about the Greenbelt,
yes.
What is your opinion on the potential golf course resort?
Okay. That's a beautiful golf course. It's been there since the late 90s. And in the late 90s, they were given the opportunity at that time to create a golf course resort, a 12-month-a-year golf course resort with a golf academy and also some limited lodging that would accommodate people who were coming to their golfing academy. And they never availed themselves of that. I don't know why, but they never did. Now they're coming to the city and saying that if they don't get their hotel that they want right now the plan is, and the plan, it's like a moving target because every month there's a different plan. But the latest plan is they want a 134 room 5-star hotel. And they want some retail uses out there too that ordinarily wouldn't be associated with a golf club. Because ordinarily the retail uses involved with a golf club, which are allowed out there now, would be the pro shop and a restaurant that's associated with golf. They've already gone far and above what would ordinarily be thought of as a restaurant involved with to accommodate their golfing patrons. They have large weddings out there, they have large functions out there, they have a large banquet facility that accommodate many uses, and they're quite busy out there. The problem is that that's a use that wouldn't be allowed in our greenbelt, and I'm not sure how they got to the point where they were able to expand their uses the way they have. Again, the restaurant, it's a very large restaurant. It's not something that we would ordinarily allow in our greenbelt. So they're already above and beyond what would be called for in our comprehensive plan. The idea of adding this large hotel is a very bad idea. I understand that people think that if they don't cave into their wishes, that Saratoga National is threatening to overdevelop as much as possible the rest of the land out there, which I think is really phony, because there's a real limit to what they can do with the rest of the land. It would have to be, if they were going to be doing anything out really need to be able to accommodate the patrons at the city center to make sure that they are able to continue to operate as well as they have. And at the same time, we need to make sure that there is parking space still made available for all the other uses that that High Rock lot is being used for. So back when the city center suggested that they would like to look into putting up a parking garage at no cost to the taxpayers, that they would build the parking garage themselves, they would have paid parking there, they would finance it, they would maintain it, and they would put it on a city lot. And again, the city center is an agency of the city of Saratoga Springs. It's not part of city government, but is a closely associated agency. So they would put this parking garage up on the city parking lot space, so they wouldn't have to purchase property, and I believe it would be a 20-year lease that they would have of the space, and that after 20 years that the land that they would be leasing, as well as the garage itself, would be reverted to city ownership. And so we would be getting this garage basically for free. So we said, well, let's look into that. You go ahead and you come up with some plans. So they came up with a series of proposals, and one of the proposal was the one that they are looking at now. And the one they are looking at now has a plan to build out from the back of the city center, across, basically going over Maple Avenue and into their parking garage. Their parking garage would be on the far north end of the High Rock lot, which is a good thing because it leaves the rest of the lot for future uses. There were some problems with that. Some people thought it was ugly. Some people thought it was just too imposing. Some people thought the visual impact was not what it should be. Other people felt that that's not a part of the city where visual impacts really make an awful lot of difference because it's in the back of a building and there really isn't much back there. I know the people at a restaurant called the Muzan House were very upset because they thought that would basically hide their business and make it more difficult for them to operate. And they were also concerned about a shadow being cast by the garage on their building that could affect the idea that they may have solar panels. And so they did put up solar panels, or I'm not sure if it's solar panels for electricity or heat or for hot water, but they do have solar panels now. And so it gets complicated. So the city center looked at their design and try to bump the building a little farther south so it wouldn't have as much of an impact on the Muzan House. And they made some changes to the design of the structure to make it more amenable, to make it look nicer, and reduce the impact of the build over Maple Avenue and things of that sort. But they have designed something that would accommodate their parking. A group of people in the city were really pushing for a different kind of approach to the High Rock parking lot, and they were looking for a more mixed-use type of use there. And so in June of this past year, I brought to the City Council a proposal, or discussion basically, about the possibility of hearing from any developers who might have other ideas about how to use that lot. Because we hadn't heard anything concrete about any other proposals for the use of that lot that would accommodate the city center, that would accommodate city hall uses, city hall workers, patrons, things of that sort, in terms of parking, plus use it for something else in addition. So an RFP came out because of that discussion that I brought to the City Council, and the RFP was answered in September, and so we have two other proposals. And they're very different from the city center's garage plan. They would include parking. Both of them would include parking. And we set a minimum of around 600, and they're pretty close to the 600 minimum in terms of parking spaces. But they also have a lot of other uses that are proposed in that. And so we have to look at those two proposals and see if they're suggesting for these uses. And they both vary from each other quite a bit in terms of how much would be used for a commercial space, how much would be used for residential.